What's up, John? How you doing?
What's up, Pete? Good to see you, man.
Likewise, likewise. Your background, those are some serious like structural members there. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. They're beams from 1750, pretty old,
Oh, okay.
pre-Revolutionary War.
That's amazing. Got it. Where's your musket? Is it
My,
above
I don't have
the
a musket.
we gotta fix that.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Wonderful. Well, hey everyone, thank you for joining us for Modern Sales Power Hour. I'm Pete Kazanjy. We'll get everyone just a couple minutes to join here. I'm super pumped to have John Sherer here today. He's the VP of Sales from Lattice. John, while we wait for people to kind of join us here before we kind of get jamming on the questions that were submitted ahead of time and kind of the questions that come in from the audience. Um, what's happening with you this weekend? Any big plans? I know that you just moved to Rhode Island. You gonna go like, I don't know, what does one do in Rhode Island? Like get like tap trees for maple syrup, or how does that, what's the situation?
There's definitely a lot of maple trees. We're post beach season, which is really, I think, the state's highlight. But might go to there's like a music festival in the Berkshires. I'm interested in going to. Need to find somebody to go with me, so haven't figured that part out yet. What about yourself?
We are definitely I'm taking my 5-year-old to the pumpkin patch tomorrow. So we're gonna pick out the perfect pumpkins to then later turn into jack-o'-lanterns. So that's going to be a very high priority thing for us tomorrow. That should be the plan. So it's kind of like going to a music festival, but instead there's face painting and pumpkins and like balloon sculpture. That'll probably be the highlight of tomorrow.
Oh, that sounds great. You get like hot apple cider.
I think it's going to be hot, so probably not. But because
Mm.
this is the thing with San Francisco and California, like not so much. I was just actually in Denver yesterday, and I went out there to speak at the Denver Startup Week, and then put together an atrium customer dinner, which was pretty great. And I got off the plane, and I texted my wife, and I'm like, God, it's cold here. She's like, Yeah, duh. They have they have seasons there, man. I was like, Oh, okay, cool. Awesome. Well, hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. Um, Before we get started, just go ahead and get familiar with the Zoom interface there. This is a highly interactive, we want it to be highly interactive session. You can use the chat, you can use the Q&A. But the whole idea here is to get the most out of our illustrious guest here, John Sherer, uh, VP of Sales at Lattice. So you don't ask, you don't get. So ask your questions there. We do have some that were submitted ahead of time, so that's fantastic. So for folks who aren't familiar, Power Hour is hosted by Modern Sales Pros. MSP is the world's largest leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related disciplines. And the community's mission is pretty straightforward. It's to create an environment for our 27,000 and growing members to answer questions that they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners that they may not know about. And so the way that we do that is through great live sessions like what you're about to experience here, our robust online forum, and our in-person events. We just had this insane Dreamforce happy hour on, goodness gracious, was that really on Tuesday? Wow, feels like a week ago. But yeah, we had 1,500 people sign up and 500 people come throughout the night. It was absolutely bananas. Dreamforce is back, baby. Um, so uh, so the so the in-person experiences are fantastic. For folks who weren't previously admitted, you should now have access to community. Before we get started, just a couple of reminders. Power Hour is a unique format. There's not really a specific piece of content that we're talking through, rather we're picking the brain of whatever revenue leader we have live, in this case, the illustrious John here. You're here to learn, so please use the Q&A, ask your questions, etc. And so with that, let's go ahead and head into some introductions here. I'll make mine really quick. I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software that helps sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve performance. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company in 2010 called Talentbin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And that's really where I went from being our business generalist founder to our first rep, first first sales manager, first sales leader, and then subsequent to being acquired was responsible for new product sales at Monster with the 600-person sales organization. So just a little bit different there. And then after that, wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and started MSP. So that's a little bit on me. John, maybe you can share with folks a little bit about what you spend your time on at Lattice, the size of the sales organization there, and then maybe give folks a little bit of background for your time at Appcues and HubSpot as well.
Yeah, totally. In long time MSP subscriber and value
MSP
getter.
OG.
Oh yeah, for sure. What's up, folks? So I work at Lattice. Lattice is a people success platform. We help companies retain your top performers, improve productivity, build the culture that you're really trying to build through a suite of tools. I lead I think what most people would look at as our SMB and mid-market sales groups there. Over my
Yep.
time at Lattice, I've sort of led all different functions from enablement to sales dev. Previous to working here, I was at Appcues at HubSpot. Most of my experience is selling to businesses under 1,000 employees in the United States. So I've led AE, sales dev, account management solutions consultant on like an inbound businesses, outbound businesses, and PLG. Don't have much channel experience, but have got to work for some really awesome businesses focused under 1,000 employees.
Gotta love that under 1,000 employee threshold, because that's where people, that mid market is where folks adopt new technology. Like they're open and receptive to new things, etc. Oh goodness, our lights are turning off in the office here. That's lovely. Yeah, so actually I wanted to ask a little, we can go ahead and get started here. I wanted to kind of ask on that, because I think the buyer at Appcues was probably product management. Is that right? Is that
Ideally,
fair?
yeah, ideally.
Ideally, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that so the HR buyer is quite a bit different, and I think that we have a lot of people in the MSP community that do sell HR tech, or maybe are potentially will do so in the future. What was kind of the biggest change in learning how the HR buyer works, and how that impacted sales management and the sales process?
Yeah, the HR buyer is really unique. When I first started selling at HubSpot in 2012, marketers didn't have a lot of budget, for SMB and mid-market companies. You had social media managers that a lot of time was like the niece of a CEO. It was like up and coming. And since then it's like shifted drastically, right? Like marketing
Yeah,
is a pro buyer. I think in a
yeah.
lot of ways, HR is just very new to buying software.
Similar
And
situation.
yeah, very similar situation. And, COVID accelerated that. It gave HR a seat at the table. We had to figure out how to work from home, and that really gave HR a louder voice. And I think we've sort of seen that be really beneficial to selling into HR and the budget that they're able to get. But some things that we see, right? HR is a high EQ buyer.
Yep.
We talk about dissonance. If you come off as salesy, or if you have a different tone in your emails than you have in person, the
Mm-hmm.
HR buyer picks up on that lack of authenticity. And so when we're
Interesting.
hiring salespeople, authenticity is top of the mark for us in terms of like a necessary character trait to be successful with this buyer,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a really interesting learning for us. And also something that we see is like HR, we think will buy from the person they really connect with the most.
Totally.
And so providing a business experience that our sellers like, thrive in, and feel really good about day to day, that comes off in the sales calls. And so we see that as a pretty meaningful leverage point.
Interesting. So the HR buyer, just to make sure I'm following, the HR buyer heavily weights their personal experience in the buying process as to which vendor they're going to select. And so as a result, that means that so that means that it's important for you guys to make it such that your sellers are well positioned to provide a compelling buyer experience, because it's almost like that's the most important feature, maybe not the most important feature, but a pretty important feature of the product that is being bought is the selling experience. And I think one thing you just noted was creating an environment such that your staff can provide that. Can you maybe touch a little bit on like the specifics of how you do that, and then maybe we can talk about how to how to facilitate a buying process that is very humane. I don't know. I just kind of pulled that adjective out of my ear. How one can facilitate. So like, let's talk about the actual like nuts and bolts of how you create an environment like that. And let's talk about the nuts and bolts of facilitating a more humane, EQ heavy sales process.
Totally. Starts with hiring profile, right? You got to get the right people on the bus and in the door. And I think the leverage point there is actually frontline management. Your
Sure.
frontline managers are providing the day-to-day experience of your sellers. And so are they empathetic? Are they actually kicking off their one-on-ones, spending time getting to know if somebody's okay, happy, liking their job, taking enough vacation to avoid burnout, building real connections? And so, that's been core to what we do here for a long time. All of our team meetings, they start off with a culture question. We go around the room. We each answer a goofy question. If it's somebody's birthday, we kick off the team meeting celebrating them. Everyone goes around, celebrates them, talks about them. And sometimes, when you're the leader running that meeting, that can be a little uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
But over time, it works. It shows people via action, not words, that what you're prioritizing is people. And I think that shows up in the way they then treat other people.
Yeah. So first line manager, let's double click on that before moving on to the the actual sales process. So one thing, because I think you mentioned earlier that you have like 6 managers, 7 managers, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, Baker's dozen. So when you get to, this is something that when you go from being, there's kind of these like layers of abstraction where when you go from being a rep to being a manager, the thing that made you successful as a rep is not going to be the thing that made you successful as a manager. In fact, it's oftentimes the opposite, right? And then similarly, when you go from being a frontline manager to being a second line manager, and we actually do some master classes on this around second level leadership, kind of facilitating second level leadership, and a big thing becomes like the systems. Like you get out of the business of like doing the management, and instead what you're doing is you're creating frameworks by which other people can do management. And so that can be like operating rhythm. It's like it's a bunch of librarian work, as I like to say, like documentation, operating rhythms, meeting invites, all those sort of things. And I think actually you kind of touched on that earlier, which is making sure that your managers are starting their one-on-ones. Like one-on-ones are just like one example of what a thing in an operating rhythm. It's a pretty important part of the operating rhythm. It's like a tentpole feature of it. How do you guys facilitate making, like, how do you drive compliance on that? Like, okay, here's your recipe for your one-on-one. And then like, how do you, recipeize that? And then 2, how do you authenticate that it's actually going down the way that it's supposed to go down in the John Sherer approved way?
Yeah, so a couple core tenets of our sort of operational cadence for frontline management, right? Pipe reviews, which we separate from one-on-ones. So that's at least 2 meetings a week. Gong call, scorecard reviews, count of a week. There's a certain number per rep you should do a week. Inspection on opportunities based on different reps or in different places. And so there's all these little things, like each manager runs their own team meeting and we have a bigger team meeting. Every Tuesday, there's an enablement hour where we're going through training of something, right? So that's pretty well documented, which is great in a static environment. Also, right now, right, the world's shifting pretty drastically. So we're making a lot of changes to that in terms of where the right place to spend time is, right? Like, maybe last month or last quarter, we were doing these power hours to increase pipeline, where right now we're doing really deep late stage deal inspection. So that's going to shift. And the directors are typically making that call and driving the accountability from there through their one-on-ones and calendar inspection. Frankly, I think we all run pretty tight calendars, and that's a way that we can stay on the same page. They're all transparent calendars, so you can see what people are doing and make sure to check in on that.
John, you are my spirit animal. Yeah, 100%. That's like, yeah, like, so first, the fact that you guys separate pipe inspection or like pipe reviews from one-on-ones. Not surprising that Lattice would be doing that because, you know, you guys are a people management company, but it's just like something that people just like screw up constantly, right? Because you will always like, because deals, especially deals at the bottom of the pipe, unless you create a special space that is not for that, they will crowd out everything else, understandably, right? Like we want to get things across the line, right?
Totally.
And so if you and so one of the things that we talk about here at Atrium is we have this phrase, calendar is destiny, where, you know, you make sure that you have appropriate spaces on the calendar for those things, and then of course those meetings or tasks have to have like the specific item that they're responsible for. Like the one-on-one has like its set of things that you're supposed to do in it. The pipeline review has its set of things that has hyperlinks to the relevant assets, et cetera, et cetera. On the what you were saying, that those various things are documented. What do you guys like? Do you guys just have like a sales playbook for that? It's just like a set of Google Docs. You have like a Notion site for your managers, so they can like go back and be like, oh, okay, like how are we supposed to, like, what's the agenda for a team meeting again? What's the agenda for a one-on-one?
Yeah, it's in Notion. It happens in onboarding. Does it get out of date regularly? Like for
Totally.
sure. Especially as things change.
Yeah.
Uh, there are baseline expectations. I think our business, frankly, could use a refresh on documentation of those baseline expectations. We're a little stretched on manager ratios right now, and so our flexibility on, you know, the degree, the depth we're able to get to, the scorecards we're able to deliver, or whatever it is pretty fluid.
Mhm.
Um, but the core tenant is the one-on-one and the pipe review. We call them pipe squeezes, and they have a very particular format and the follow-up email, and like I'm on it, our CRO's on it, everyone can sort of see it, and
Pipe
you know, that
squeeze.
drives accountability.
I love that. Is that done on a per team basis, or is it done on a per rep basis?
Per rep. So in our 0 to 250 employee segment, which we call commercial,
Yep.
we believe that like the key leverage points on any mid to late stage deal are: is there a next step on the calendar?
Yep.
Is there some sort of incentive? Is the prospect aware of the incentive? Are they aware of the next step? And if all of those things exist, 90% plus chance the deal's going to close. And so basically, we pull up a scratch pad view with all the late stage deals, and we go through every deal and we ask those questions, yes or no. We talk about the next steps. If it has next steps, we highlight it green. If it doesn't have next steps, we highlight it red. And then that all comes out in an email that includes their commit, estimate, and forecast, and best case forecast. That
Mhm.
happens every other week, and all of management's on it, so we can all kind of see it and celebrate people when it's going well.
I love it. Great. And Scratchpad just shipped color formatting the other day.
Oh, I didn't see that. That's cool. We're
Yeah.
manually highlighting it in Gmail, so
But
um,
anyway, like I it's so funny. We use Scratchpad over here at Atrium as well, and they're Atrium customers. But
nice.
I remember I got an email from Puyan, or like, sorry, Puyan's like marketing organization, I'm sure, sent the email talking about that now you could do like color coding within Scratchpad. Okay, got it. Wow. Okay, sweet. So I like how it's like, do there is there a next step? Is there a clear next step? And so much of that is about like driving awareness of the reps themselves. Like, yeah, actually, did we instantiate a next step, or is it more kind of like, okay, talk soon, right? Which I think is extremely important with a with an HR buyer as well, because a lot of times the HR buyers have a proclivity to like not want to tell you like bad news, right? Because they're, again, like kind of high EQ folks. And so it's really, really important to like pressure test that as a rep. And so if you're not doing a good job of making sure that you're not having happy ears, which of course in lower segments, you're going to have more junior reps, and they're going to have a proclivity to have happy years, especially when they're talking to people who are good at saying happy things, which is kind
Totally.
of what HR people do.
Yeah, and back to your original question on the HR buyer, something else that's a really interesting learning is, and really nice, like the HR buyer will answer your discovery questions. They'll let you go deep, right? You can get to third level pain with them. However, they don't buy software most years. So they're just not familiar with the purchasing process typically. And
Right.
so you can get all the information that you might need to make a really compelling sale, but actually navigating the purchase process is where you got to be really tight.
Which I think you guys have observed that and now manage around that, right? It sounds like, making sure that your reps are doing discovery. Yeah, if you had like a more recalcitrant buyer, and I'm trying to think of like maybe what persona might be more recalcitrant, maybe like IT might be a little bit more kind of like guarded. Like I don't want to talk to I don't want to talk to humans, let alone talk to a salesperson. Whereas in this case, like HR people love to talk to folks, right? And like, oh yeah, let's have a conversation. Let's have a chit chat, a little coffee clutch here. But then the purchasing process is like so like that may just happen more naturally because it's like less of a challenging part of the sale. And so that's why you guys have focused a lot of your managerial inspection and kind of like process rigor around what one of my sales managers, Sean Cardenas, calls path to partnership. And I think a lot of reps misunderstand this. They're like, well, of course they know how to purchase purchase software in their organization. It's like, what makes you think that?
Totally. Totally. And Pete, forgive me for this. Like, what's recalcitrant? That's a new one
Oh,
for me.
just yeah, well, just like kind of like not forthcoming, right? Like not forthcoming, a little a little bit more guarded. I get like a developer sale would be like
Totally.
that. And so in those sort of situations, like maybe you have to work really hard in order to extract better discovery information, what have you. And so you could totally imagine it, like if you're in a different, actually product management might be a good example of that. Like
Great
maybe when
example.
you're
Yeah, totally.
like when you're selling Appcues, like get out of here, sales, sales guy, sales gal. And so, showing up doing what I like to call turbo rapport, right? Where you like sprint hard to like, form a connection. I call it like, getting in the starting blocks and like sprinting out of the starting blocks. Like, hey, the first 90 seconds, I'm going to work really hard for us to become friends. And that like then knowing that like, oh yeah, like this IT organization, like they've purchased a bunch of different things before, this product organization's purchased a bunch of things before, so this person's going to have less of a challenge there, but we really need to inspect on the up funnel stuff. So changing gears a little bit, was a question that was submitted ahead of time, and I think at this point, how big was Appcues' sales organization when you were leading stuff there?
Maybe 30, 32, I
How
think.
many sellers was it? Like,
Probably, I think 12.
oh, okay, yeah. So like the segment that you got going on at Lattice is like pretty substantial, right? From a comparative standpoint. And so I think one of the for sales leaders, one of the questions is like, what's the most important kind of internal partnership that you have as a sales leader, especially for such like a large organization?
Yeah, for me, it's finance for sure. Um, I'm really fortunate. I have three incredible partners in finance that have sort of been here at Lattice for a long time, and we've been able to develop a great relationship. But from the get go, what I have found so valuable is that one, they're deeply pragmatic, and two, they have the broadest purview on the business. They're inspecting net dollar retention. They're seeing all the details all over the business. So, if I've got some hypothesis on something I think is a good idea, I can go to them, and they have the most rounded viewpoint to help me think through that, to partner with me on getting questions answered. I would say our finance team is also really operational. So
Mhm.
I think they can sort of help me not just get the question answered, but think through what we might do about it. And so that partnership has been fantastic. And something in particular, I know I've said a few things I think my finance team is great at, but something in particular that I think is unique is, at least as a sales leader, my experience is that helping other people in the business understand the psychology of a salesperson is a challenge.
Hmm.
Um, it's very easy to look at our teams like a spreadsheet, and
Sure.
it's a really dangerous way to think. Um, and it can be
Right.
counterintuitive to say, hey, like, let's reduce quota in the summer so that people can take vacation, right? Like that might make you immediately think, okay, so activity is going to go down, outbound pipeline is going to go down, they're not going to take
Hmm.
meetings, business is going to lose money.
Right.
But actually, like, the cost of a new hire is immense, and you're going to retain more people. You're going to avoid burnout. Uh, they might refer more people because they like their job. There's actually all these other benefits in there, and I think having partnership with finance, who holds a lot of the keys, frankly, as you're planning, can help you make the right investments in your team.
Yeah, I think that this is something that we contend with quite a bit at Atrium, where um, along a different vector, insofar as so Atrium is all about data-driven sales management. It's all about using metrics to measure, manage, and improve the performance of teams. That being said, these are people, right? They're people, right? And so it shows up in a variety of ways. Oftentimes with like sales operations or kind of like data teams or what have you. Sometimes they get kind of like they kind of get wrapped around the axle about the level of precision that's required in order to kind of like measure at a level that could improve a rep. It's kind of like, oh well, this rep, this rep's has been adding these incremental meetings to their calendar, so their meeting counts are off, by a little bit. It's like, yeah, but the point here is not the fact that they have like 14 meetings, this month versus 16 meetings this month. It's the fact that they're in the mid-teens and everybody else is at 40,
Hmm.
right? Right, like this isn't chemistry where we need to have a 2 or 3 significant digits of like of precision. And I could imagine a similar situation. I think there's a good lesson there. So you were talking about it appropriately, because like you're up here at the macro level thinking kind of like the field marshal level, kind of thinking about like what are the levers that are going to impact 60 reps, right? Like, for an entire July or an entire August or what have you. But then being kind of empathetic to the fact that these are not just numbers, and they're people that have emotions and so on and so forth, can reduce all the way down to like how you contend with like deal desk stuff. Like if you like if a rep is like really 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 pressing and they're like have terrible 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 month, and like this deal that like maybe is marginal right now and is at the edges of its discount bands, like do we just say no, that's too much of a discount for this, that's out of band, et cetera, or do we say, hey, actually they had a tough month last month, they're on the mend right now, but this would actually really positively impact their psychology, let's let this slide, right?
Yeah, great example. And I think that being cognizant of your group's general attainment, what percentage of your team is over 100%, are good indicators to understand sort of where you are in terms of that organizational health, that I think should dictate the way you make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Um, got to assume a lot of people right now not at peak organizational health.
Yeah.
Uh, we're trying to get logos, trying to get people to feel like they're winning. So if
Yep.
we got to play with deal desk a little bit to win, like, we're here to win.
It is funny. Like I don't. You ever watch Billions? I've only seen a
Have it.
couple like YouTube clips here or there, but it's about this like hedge fund, right? And but they have a sports psychologist on staff.
Hmm.
Like sales is one of those things where it's really kind of funny, right? Because like the psychology of the individuals will actually have like it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy to the plus, and then also a self-fulfilling prophecy to the minus as well, if you're not careful. And so you as a leader, you have to be really mindful of that because we want to have we want to have positive feedback loops and we don't want to have negative feedback loops. We had a couple of questions that came in here that are specific to HR sales motion. So Brian here had a question earlier on leader lead routing and assignment, on how you identify a rep that the HR buyer will connect with best. as like, is that scorable? I think my reaction to that is like, that sounds like it would probably be pretty tough to do, to kind of be like, oh, well, here's a specific genre of HR person coming in, and like, we got to do the Harry Potter sorting hat and be like, oh yeah, okay, you're going to Hufflepuff, you're going to Ravenclaw, etc. As compared to just making sure that all your reps are properly equipped in order to like have those empathetic conversations. Do you guys do any sort of like matching around like routing? I think actually we were talking earlier about you guys are going to be moving to territories next year, and you haven't yet. How do you do routing stuff? Does that come into play at all?
We use chili piper. It's pretty round robin. It's clean. The leverage point there for me is hiring. Though, yep. Right, we've all sold to somebody in New York, right? New York buyers are specific. I love them personally because I'm not a big rapport builder. I want to do the work. And so I do believe that over time, as our organization grows and we move into a more flushed out territory model, there's some juice in Northeasterners selling to Northeasterners and Central America, Central selling to Central. I think. I don't know how much though.
You're totally making me remember this back at Talent Bin, where it was so funny, the SDRs who would like call on Boston and call on New York. It was like quite a bit different than people calling into like Chicago or like Seattle or San Francisco or what have you. Yeah, I could totally see that. I mean, the way that we do routing, we just kind of like segment, not necessarily. I mean, the interesting thing with us is I'm a big fan of making it such that people are aware what the external signifier is of like need in an organization. So in like in Atrium's case, organizations, like the need for Atrium scales with the number of AEs, SDRs, AM, CSMs, essentially the people who are being managed by metric. But the other thing that ends up being important is how well handled is that case already internally in the organization, right? And so usually that correlates to the number of sales operations folks in seat. And so we actually have a tiering system. Tier 1 is like an organization that doesn't have any sales operations in place. Tier 2 is a single sales operations person. Tier 3 is a anywhere between like 2 to 10, and then tier 4 is beyond that. And so we use that for routing. And the more senior reps, like our reps, we don't have like formal segmentation yet, but our reps early on in their tenure, they're working on tier 1s and tier 2s. We have that tagged in in HubSpot as our marketing automation platform, and then our SDR, and then HubSpot plus Chili Piper plus Lean Data route appropriately, kind of based on that.
Yeah, on demo requests, which are what we often refer to as inbound, we're pretty just clean on the round robin nature of it. However, we're constantly nurturing our pretty massive database of accounts, right? And those businesses are interacting with us. And we use a product called Mad Kudu. We also used it at Appcues. I'm a big fan. To both behaviorally and firmographically score accounts. And for us, growth rate is actually a really big indicator that somebody wants to buy our software, right? Like you love your 100 people, you love your culture, you're about to double, you want to scale that culture. How do you do it, right? That's a conversation that we have all the time. And so that's a really good indicator for us.
Nice. Another question that we had here from Sahil was one of the biggest challenges I find in selling to HR is developing urgency. Many programs can seem like a nice to have. Any experience in overcoming that? I think I heard that a little bit earlier on the pipe squeeze methodology around like, is there an incentive in place, and is the buyer aware of the incentive? Is that a way that you guys approach driving urgency, and are there other ways that you approach driving urgency as well?
Yeah, so for us, we've got a couple windows during the year that are different. So we sell performance review software, right? Like performance reviews tend to happen the middle of the year and the end or beginning of the year. And so if somebody has a performance review date, that's very easy to sell around from a timing perspective. It's like, okay, you're just working backwards from implementation, basically. It's those other parts of the year where things are more difficult. And that's where, if there isn't an urgent reason to buy our software, one, I'd question how well we did on discovery, first of all,
Yeah.
but two, that's where we're going to go to incentives. And that's why we track it really closely, as we use incentives to drive urgency. We try to use like non-discounting incentives mostly to drive urgency.
Mhm.
But we're a pretty typical SaaS business otherwise.
What would be examples of non-discounting incentives?
Payment terms. We do this thing called free months. That's like,
Yep.
pretty fantastic. Hey, we'll give you a free month, which is basically making it, you're paying for 12 months and getting 13.
Yep.
We'll recognize the ARR immediately. So like that tends to be a pretty popular one, because for the AE, it doesn't touch their attainment or their paycheck. So that we use that one a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I think the point is well taken around, if you're, the way of driving urgency is to reveal to the prospect like the opportunity cost of like not solving the problem. And I think that like either the opportunity cost of not solving the problem, or like the real costs that are being encountered right now. And I think that different different solutions, it can be like easier or harder to do that on a relative basis. Like we use this, we use like champion tracking software. There's like I don't know if you guys are familiar with User Gems. They're
Oh
a,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
craft
Totally.
portfolio company.
Yep.
And like they're an Atrium customer, and one, it's like pretty easy to just show up and say like, hey, here are your customers that are like on your customer site right now, like on your your customer success like marketing page or whatever, and here are the 4 that are no longer at those companies anymore, right? And so if that's 4 out of like 10 right there, or 20 right there, how many how many contacts do you have in your CRM? Oh, okay, 50,000. Okay, great. So it's this many folks who are probably ripe opportunities. What's your win rate right now? Oh, okay, got it. It's like 20%, and your ASP is like this, so like that's your opportunity cost. So like that should like really like light a fire. So it's easier for someone like them. We have a little bit of an advantage here insofar as like we sell on customer data. So like it takes 3 minutes to set up an Atrium account, and so very quickly managers or leaders can, like, the software will identify issues within organizations that maybe they weren't aware of. Like, wow, did you realize that like 30% of your pipeline like hasn't been touched in 30 days, like on this team over here? Whoa, geez, right? So I think that like thinking about like crystallizing how the actual pain versus like them being like, yeah, this is kind of nice to have, like, but yeah, but what if it's cheaper, right? Like you're kind of like fighting from the back foot there. How do you guys facilitate better discovery to make sure that you kind of don't get in that situation?
It's something we're really focused on right now. So, I joined Lattice almost 3 years ago, and at the time we were 90% inbound, and we sold 2 products. Today we sell 5 products, and we're 50% inbound. And so in the old world, right, I was just trying to play a game of sorting and friction reduction. Find the right account, reduce the friction to purchase. And that was the game we were trying to play, because there was so much demand. Don't go and try to make the hard sell, go and find more easy sells.
Mhm.
And so discovery really wasn't that high of a
It's like
leverage point.
it's like check boxes.
Yeah, it's 40% close rate. It's like, do I think the discovery was awesome? Not necessarily, but it's okay. Today, right, we're now working with folks earlier on in their buyer's journey. They're not all at demo request phase anymore. And so we need to help them think through the value that we can provide to them. And so we went through and are still going through something called Command of the Message by Force Management, which is a massive investment from both a time and cash standpoint to redo our discovery calls and demos, and moving them from a feature focus to a value focus. And it's a massive lift. Very bullish on it. Huge undertaking.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, a lot of organizations that we've had a bunch of customers who have gone through Command of the Message. Checker did it, Figma did it. seems to be it's definitely like a hallmark of like organizations growing up from a sales process standpoint. Also like systematization, geez Louise, systematizing the discovery questions and like the mantras and all that sort of stuff ends up being really important. I didn't realize you guys are selling 5 products right now. Holy mackerel, that's a lot. What are those?
Performance reviews,
Mhm.
engagement surveys,
Yep.
career pathing, OKRs and goals, and this week we launched compensation.
Wow, that's a lot. So is each rep supposed to be like good to go on each product?
Yeah.
Wow,
Our
that's a
attach
big
rates are great on it.
undertaking.
Like, yeah, it's the synergies between them is enough to where it seems to solve on its own pretty well. I think the risk is in over demoing. So I'm talking to somebody who
Sure.
just wants performance reviews, and a rep shows them 5 products, and they're like, Lattice is way more than I need. I'm going to go buy the basic tool instead of the best of breed solution. That's our risk. And so that's
Mhm.
also a command of the message. We're using command of the message to change our demo in that direction of like, sell them what they want to buy. Don't try to oversell.
Yeah, which I think is important because the other thing that like the old school way of selling SaaS was to think, especially like going all the way back in the day to like on-prem software, is that you were going to have this like one-off transaction and then like you're like, okay, cool, bye, maybe we'll see you in 3 years. Whereas right now you're going to have an ongoing relationship. I was doing a fireside chat with Nick Mehta the other day from Gainsight, and I think like trying to sell too much to somebody up front, whether it's a deal size standpoint or the number of products that you're trying to deliver to them, can really negatively impact your win rates, as you were kind of pointing out there. And there's kind of like no reason to do so, because you can sell it to them later after they've had success with whatever it was that they're super pumped about. Like they showed up and like they were hand raising around and they had urgency around performance reviews. I mean, obviously that's you guys' bread and butter. They're like, hey, we got to we're doing a performance review cycle 60 days out from now, and we're kind of like, we've got a gun to our head on that. Let's go for that. Adding in like, oh, okay, well, have you thought about like refactoring your one-on-one process? Probably doesn't help with like getting that done. But knowing that you, after they execute that initial performance review cycle and they're stoked on the Lattice customer success process and they're happy with the software, now they're going to be receptive to the fact that there's more, that there are other solutions there. Do your AEs keep the accounts for like a certain amount of time so they can sell incremental product? No.
90 days. Not
Mm-hmm.
long. It's not really a big part of our motion. I
Really?
think some no, you know, we have an account management team that handles upselling accounts over time. Our big focus after somebody purchases is adoption. We know that if somebody adopts X percent of X features,
Yeah.
retention is so high, right? So that like all of our calories just go into adoption. That's what we care
Mm-hmm.
about. And
Yeah.
that's the risk with overselling product, right? Is because then all of a sudden you've got
Yeah. 3 things
poorly
to
adopted
adopt.
set of shelfware. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. One thing I remember talking with the Figma leadership about this is that, and this might be applicable to you guys, maybe it's not, is you just have to be careful about if the AEs can't keep accounts for a certain amount of time such that they can sell incremental products into them, or like expand in the case of Figma, or like even in the case of Atrium, expanding to other teams ends up being a very important. We don't have incremental products. We have, we expand into incremental teams within an organization, because otherwise what can end up happening is those AEs are like, oh well, man, I'm gonna try to eat the pot, the whole pie, all at once, and in so doing end up like negatively impacting their win rates. I forget how Figma handled this, but it was like a lot longer than you would anticipate. In the case of Atrium, because like the way that oftentimes we start working with a customer is like we'll enter an organization and start working with like the sales development group as an example, or we'll enter an organization and we'll be working with we'll start in like sales operations or sales enablement, and like they'll use Atrium for kind of like their own data driven management of kind of up like strategically across the teams before we get into the managers or what have you. And then of course our AEs want, because we price on a per like manager seat, we call it manager seat basis, they want to get into then like those incremental teams. If they didn't have like the lease on the account for longer, then they would want to like they would elongate their initial transaction cycle, and potentially injure the opportunity, or like injure the win rates, because they're like trying to get the whole thing at once. So something to consider there.
Yeah. For us, 99% of our new logos are 100% of the company. We really fight hard to do what we call partial pops. For us, the Lattice platform, rolling it out in one department it just hasn't led to long-term success.
No, that wouldn't work. I was thinking about, for you guys, it would be more like product based as opposed to like an organization, especially like the thing with definitely, especially with products that are kind of like what I like to call like eat your broccoli sort of things, like, hey, this is really good for you. You should like you really should do this. You need to have some sort of like top down initiative on it, and because otherwise it can be tough to be like, oh yeah, like this part of the organization over here like really revolutionized their one-on-ones through using Lattice. We should like do that for other folks, versus the CEO or the CHRO saying like, hey, we had a really crappy employee engagement survey, and people don't feel like their career pathing is there, so we're going all in on career pathing, and that's a big thing for our entire 200-person company, and that's like a 90-day in like a 90-day process there, an investment. That would probably be a much more successful thing than like trying to land in a small part of the organization.
Totally.
Yeah. So one of the things that obviously is like really top of mind with a lot of folks right now is the notion of like self-serve product helping kind of penetrate organizations more quickly, product like growth and what have you. You worked on that quite a bit at Appcues. What were some of the biggest like lessons that came out of that?
Totally. So at Appcues, we're a Pendo competitor, which people might be more familiar with, but basically, we sold software to help you enhance your free trial or your customer adoption experience.
We use Appcues here at Atrium.
Love that. I was the first employee at Appcues. I was there for 5 years. It was a really, really cool experience to do something that early. And we sold in a free trial to businesses who were looking to improve their free trial. So it was very meta in terms of the depth in which we were sort of in the PLG universe. Mm-hmm. Two things really stand out to me. One is more of a tactic. Two, I think, to any sales leaders thinking about jumping into a PLG business who haven't been involved in one before. One is if you're using a free trial or you're selling into people that are using the product, I think your rep profile needs to be really specific. Our hit rate on AEs was not fantastic at different points in time. And the most substantial learning is that like you kind of need to reinvent your selling style to sell within a free trial. And if you're not unwilling to learn the product, get into the weeds, be semi-technical, right? I don't think you're gonna make it.
You're screwed. Definitely.
We put people on support for a week, on technical support for a week during onboarding. And some people would like love it and learn a ton. And some people like, this is the worst. And like, guess who succeeded? It was pretty straightforward. And for us, our ACV was too low to support sales engineering. So
that's funny. Sort of that's like, that totally aligns with our experience here at Atrium, because I wouldn't say that we have a technical product, but like the topic is like, it's a little nerdy, right? And like,
totally.
the product is designed to like abstract that away as much as possible, because we're trying to make sales, democratize sales math for like non-analytical non-technical managers. And but our reps have to be they have to be expert at this stuff. And so the folks that we found a lot of success with is like it's the folks that have grew up like obsessed with like baseball cards.
Oh, I love
Essentially.
that. Yeah, that's great.
Totally. Like it's so funny. It's like all the like the sports like the sports stats geeks uh like across different varieties, right? And it's not just like sports stuff. It's like people who have a little bit of like an analytical bent because um I think this is actually especially important, not just from a PLG standpoint, but also when you're creating a new category, because you're going to have a bunch of folks who just don't have that acumen whatsoever. And so what you need is your reps to have that expertise, but then also be comfortable or like confident in that expertise. Because one of the things that we contend with here quite a bit is what I call the little old me problem. Like, I'm just little old me. Like, how can I possibly tell this like 50-year-old sales leader that he's thinking about measuring his team completely wrong? Like, I'm just little old me. And it's like, well, the reality is that if he is thinking about it wrong, then you need to be upfront about that and have the confidence to say like, hey, we work with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of customers, and this is the more modern way of approaching this sort of thing, and here's the specific reasons why. You have to not only be technical enough or like comfortable enough with the product in order to do that, but also comfortable enough with the subject matter in order to speak to that, because it's not the same as just like, oh yeah, like our ATS is like shinier and faster than the other ATS that you already have right now.
Totally. Like one that I loved is people with a finance background. If you knew how to build a macro in Excel, you've got the right level of technical expertise to sell our product. That was the
For
line.
Appcues, that was a
Yeah,
good
it was
one.
perfect. Oh, like you knew how to build a macro? Great. You're going to be perfect here.
Successful.
Yeah.
I love that. And then, but I think the other, I was at a customer dinner for this company called Census the other day, and they were having me talk to a bunch of RevOps people about product-led sales, and the Sylvain, one of the leaders, one of the Census's leaders, asked me a question about like, can every product have a product-led sales component or a product-led growth component to it? And my response to that, I was like, no, not necessarily, right? Like, there's some products that they can. I would imagine that like Lattice probably feels like a situation where it's probably pretty hard to have like a self-serve component to it, because it requires a desire, and like you can't just like test it out just for like funsies, right? Because it's more about like having a big investment in culture, a big investment in like OKRs, or a big investment. Have you guys thought about that at all? Like how you potentially could use product in order to reduce that initial friction, or just like it's not even an important thing?
Oh, I think we talk about it all the time. It's a pretty frequent conversation, like go go further down market, go up market, et cetera. Um, I wonder about the HR buyer really being
Sure.
the try it before you buy it buyer. I
Hmm.
don't think they
Fair
are
point.
on our primary products. I think it would be
Fair point.
interesting to like acquire or build some sort of lighter tangential product that drove the right
Something.
sort of buyer into our ecosystem. But I don't think we've sort of seen the
Yeah.
clear vision.
Yeah. You need somebody who wants to tinker, right? And I think at the beginning of this conversation, you pointed that out, where a big part of what makes the HR buyer happy with the Lattice purchasing experience is having a good partner in the form of the rep, right? Not like, hey, just give me the thing and I'll play with it, right?
Totally. Totally. And we call our customers partners. We call our prospects partners. We call everybody a partner, right? We try to instill that attitude into our engagement.
Yeah. Well, one thing I actually had neglected, now that we're talking about this, I neglected to ask about this earlier. We were talking about facilitating reps having facilitating an environment for the reps that makes them conducive to having that like empathetic, humane purchasing experience with the um, with the buyer who values that. What about the purchasing, or what about the sales process itself helps facilitate that? Because like there's the environmental stuff that we're talking about, and the onboarding kind of like cultural stuff for the sales organization. are there specific things you guys do in the sales process to make that easier for, HR folks to be comfortable with?
Nothing atypical,
Mhm.
really. It's a pretty straightforward sales process. We know the importance of next steps, and we know the importance of helping somebody buy once we're on the same side of the table.
Mhm.
In our larger, more complex deals, champion building is like the necessary thing to win a deal. A lot of times, HR won't bring in EB access for us to talk with, and so you're coaching them on selling up,
Yeah.
and so the trust needs to be locked in
Yeah.
for those deals to really be forecastable.
Yeah. Do you guys, we use mutual planning software in order to facilitate that. We use software called Accord in order to not only like have a mutual plan to like go live dates, but also to create kind of like an asset or something that encloses assets. In our case, obviously it's different because an organization has an Atrium account set up while they're going through the process, and so it's more kind of like, hey, look, like we identified this pipeline hygiene problem in these 6 reps right here, and it was managed over these 2 weeks, and look at that, it's already better already, look at and you're not even customers yet, yay. So it's like, mini case studies and things like that in the Accord process. Do you guys do anything in terms of like buyer enablement and champion building? Do you guys do anything like that?
Yeah, we use a product called Doc.
Oh, right.
Doc was started by our former VP of marketing, Alex
Oh,
Krakoff. So we've
there you
been sort of playing with it since day one, and it's one of those things. It's not mandatory, but the adoption's quite high.
there you go. Yeah, it's one of those things that yeah, I think it like that would be an example of a product that might potentially lend itself to more PLG behaviors, insofar as you have people who have a very strong economic incentive. In the case of salespeople, they have a very strong economic incentive to raise their win rates. And so if something is a better thing, right, like, or will help facilitate their ability to like close more business or have higher win rates, and it's a low technical lift, they'll be receptive to it. So like they're down to tinker, right? The same way they like we're down to tinker with like new disco questions or like new trial
Splash
closes, or
pad.
yeah, exactly, things like that. Like those folks have strong economic incentives to kind of tinker around there. And so as long as the thing is like not too technical, then that can be really conducive there. Um, so given that we're kind of coming up on time here, I was wondering, like, what's one of the things that you've learned recently that you would want to share with our audience that has just kind of like helped you the most in the last bit
Hmm.
as a sales leader, perhaps.
Um, yeah, top one for me is skip levels.
Okay.
That we're in a stressful economic environment. I am operationally and data oriented. World gets stressful, I go to data.
Mhm.
I go to operations. I go to understanding how the world's evolving. My natural instinct is not to go to people
Mhm.
and to lead from the front. And
Yeah.
one of my managers gave me that feedback about 2.5 months ago, and it
Right.
was it was just fantastic feedback. And he's so right, right? I actually see it in other places in my life too. And
Sure.
um, so I basically blocked off the first hour and a half of every day, and I do 2 to 3 skip levels a day across the organization for 20 minutes.
Mhm.
They're low format. It's mostly about connecting personally and asking for feedback. And it's really it's added tons of joy to my life because we have an awesome sales team and I love salespeople and I love spending time with them. Two, I'm getting firsthand information rather than like double filtered information, which allows
Yep.
me I can dig into that live so I can ask the question rather than sort of guessing and
Yep.
navigating, which has been really great. And two, they get space to ask hard questions, and if I do a good job, they'll ask me the hard questions that are actually on their mind.
Yep.
And I'm not going to say that like that always happens, but every week
You
I
make
have
space for
one.
it.
Yeah, every week there's at least somebody who comes at me with like the hard stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm here to answer it.
Yeah, like, and then even if they don't do it in that environment, what it does is like, oh yeah, John's here to listen. He cares about this, and then so it might show up as an email after the fact, right?
Oh, it drives a lot of what we do for sure. I'm learning a
Yeah,
lot doing
yeah.
this.
Right, exactly. John, I was thinking about our meeting. It shows up on like, on Saturday or whatever. You're like, clearly this person's like redrafted this email like 5 times. But but you'd rather have that information, right?
Absolutely. Like we're all on the same team, right? It's not a you versus me. It's all same team. I'm trying to solve the problems and I get stuff wrong all the time. And my job is to recover quickly and remake the correct decision. And I need feedback to do that.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, skip levels. Another example of like, man, so much of management is really like eating your broccoli, right? And this is why I think like having, it's like not things that you like are naturally pulled towards. And so like again, full, I think what you observed there was we use this term internally at Atrium of like our sales software. So we have Atrium, our software, and then we have our operating rhythm for our sales organization is the software that like runs your. And so when you see things like that, what you did is you said, "Oh, I just went and started doing some skip levels." You're like, "No, no, no, I blocked the first hour and a half of my day. Right? I systematized it, blocked the first hour and a half of my day, and now, and like maybe you'll do that for like a month or so, see what comes out of it. Do we continue to do this or do we stop doing this, right? Do I then, and then maybe I share that with other parts of the revenue organization and say, hey, customer success leader, we're doing this thing over here that's really awesome, and I might consider doing that over in your organization as well.
Yeah, if somebody could just build me scheduling software to make sure I'm doing this evenly, unbiasedly, meeting with everybody and always, it'd be great because scheduling 70 ongoing skip levels is
This sounds like you need internal chili piper. This seems like a Lattice feature. Just hit up JZack and be like, hey, yo
it'd be a
man, we got to.
great PLG entry point for us.
There you go. All right, we figured out your PLG entry point. All right, well, John, this was absolutely fantastic. Thank you for taking the time to share all your lessons with our audience. I hope you have an awesome weekend hanging out with the folk musicians there in the Berkshires. Folks, next week we're going to have Trevor Childers as the head of enterprise sales at Captivate IQ. So go ahead and show up for that next week. And then otherwise, John, have a great weekend. Okay.
Yeah. See you, Pete. And thanks, everybody. Bye.
Okay. Bye.